Day 14. Cozy. Billy stood looking up at his mother's house on 61st Street, his standard-issue green winter hat pulled down over the tips of his ears, keeping out the chill that was blowing up the street. His duffel bag felt heavy. Everything felt heavy, and the relief he had expected had turned to worry in his stomach and was keeping him on the sidewalk. He hadn't seen his mother in 2 years since he left for England. He wrote to tell her that he'd been shipped home and was going to be demobbed, but he had no idea if she'd received it. Such was Uncle Sam's mail service. He had no idea what to expect. He pulled the doorbell, looking as old as he had left it. It was already dark, and he could almost hear his mother's concern at who would be calling at this hour. His heart was making his chest jump. And then, there she was, framed in the warm orange light of the hallway, of home. She looked so small. "Hey, Ma," he managed. She let out a noise, part cry, part sigh, part laugh. It went some way to explaining how she must have felt. She almost fell forward into him, thumping her head into his chest. He put his free arm around her, and they stood there chuckling and crying together. He had no idea what he had been worried about. He wasn't even at the foot of the stairs before she was telling him about what the neighbours would say, what they had been doing, especially Marge next door and the nice fella she was seeing. He was a plumber, came back himself not so long ago. Billy might well have just come home from work, on any normal day. The normality was like a warm blanket. His little sister appeared, except she wasn't so little anymore. She squealed with delight and punched him hard on the arm. He gave chocolate and an opened pack of French playing cards, a carton of cigarettes for his mother, along with a studio picture of him that a kindly photographer in Holland had insisted he take. There had been a queue of GIs standing in the living room of that little house, combing spit into their hair and tidying their uniforms as best they could for their own pictures. His sister reappeared with some bottles of beer on what felt like half the street to celebrate. They were all clapping Billy on the back and trying to contain their curiosity about what had happened over there. They had already heard enough stories to know to be careful asking outright, but Billy didn't mind, only he could feel his eyelids drooping. Ma's instinct drove everyone away at that point, over cries of indignation and promises of work and baseball tickets, until the little kitchen was quiet once more. "Now," declared his mother, "I don't suppose they fed you properly over in Europe." An hour later, Billy thought he would never move again. Normally, Billy's sister would be chided for not eating, but when she gave up early on, Ma didn't notice. Billy's empty plate was a challenge she rose to magnificently, maintaining a steady stream of bread fried in butter and garlic, spaghetti, meatballs the size of his fist, cheese, olives, ignoring cries to stop when she felt it was time for dough balls with sugar and apricot jam. He was pretty sure she didn't take a bite, but she had never looked happier. "Ready!" called his sister from up the hall. Ma replied to his bemused look. "I had your sister run you a hot bath. Then straight to bed, young man." "Yes, ma'am." Some orders were easier than others. The tub was smaller than he remembered at first, but as he adjusted to the temperature, it seemed to grow, almost becoming part of his body. He closed his eyes and allowed months of mud and blood and tears to diffuse away, or begin to. He wasn't allowed much time to think as his sister, aware of a captive audience she had gone without for so long, started to share her news from the other side of the bathroom door. Her offhand stories about a boy from over in Elmhurst, the brother of one of Billy's buddies, wasn't cryptic enough to stop him poking fun at her. She called Billy various names, but the way she laughed told him he was right. Her language didn't go unheard, and their mother's voice sent her away with a huff. Although the water was cooling, it took a monumental effort to get up out of the bath. The deep warmth in his muscles made the steamy air icy by comparison, and the thick towel warming on the hot water pipe made him sigh, topped only by the ironed two-piece pyjamas his mother had laid on the chair by the sink. He closed his eyes in front of the mirror and hugged himself. He kissed Ma goodnight, pleading with her to take the hot chocolate away, hugged his sister again, and padded into his childhood bedroom, the smell of the laundered bed linen sweeter than anything nature had to offer. He peeled back the top sheet with a crackling fizz and slid his feet down to the end of the bed. The same creaking spring was there, the same stain in the corner of the ceiling. There had been times when he believed he would never see any of this again, and he had to wake himself up a little to be sure that he wasn't dreaming yet. He lowered his head to the pillow and felt the support of the mattress roll down his back, into his shoulders and legs. He allowed himself an indulgent sigh once more. He had stayed at some surprisingly fancy places in France and even Germany, with silk sheets and Arabica coffee somehow acquired, but they had nothing on this. He turned his head a little to free a bent hair that was tickling him, the cotton pillowcase smoothing his cheek, and then